Good evening. Today is November 22nd, 2024. I hope everybody is having a great day. I want to recall events from 50 years ago, on the year 1974, the month of November. Some things that I remember about it and some stuff I've looked up that was important things in history happened on November 1st, and uh, that would have been a Friday. November 1st, the United Nations affirmed the independence of Cyprus. And got a list of things here. I'm not going to read all of them, but ones that I consider important. On November the 12th, um, South Africa was suspended from the UN General Assembly over its racial policies called apartheid. This system of racial separation would exist for a number of, for another 20 years. And one of my teachers and mentors, Dr. John Johnson, um, who taught world religions at Baylor and directed my dissertation, Dr. Johnson played a key role and he and his wife were election judges in 1994 when apartheid was dismantled. But that would be 20 years later. Um, on November 15th, Ringo Starr released Goodnight Vienna and Only You in the United Kingdom. Let me back up to November 5th. That was also a very important day historically because that was the U.S. elections. In my opinion, they turned out much better than the elections this year. There was this was during the time of Watergate, and the country was still reeling from the corruption of the Nixon administration, which is nothing compared to what we're seeing now. And Nixon had resigned earlier that year, and the Democrats made substantial gains in both houses of Congress. The freshman legislators that came into office that year were called Watergate babies. And I remember I'd made the observation at the time, the long term Republican U.S. Senator from Texas, John Tower, was unfortunately not up for re-election that year because that would have been a good year to get rid of him, but unfortunately it didn't happen. It was on the 19th of November, the United Nations General Assembly granted the Palestine Liberation Organization observer status. It was in October of 74, the previous month, that Yasser Arafat, the chairman of the PLO, had made a speech before the UN, in which is often quoted, I come to you bringing an olive branch and a freedom fighter's gun. Don't let the olive branch fall from my hand. And on November 20th, the United States filed an antitrust suit to break up AT&T. And then on November to the 23rd, which would have been a Saturday, 60 Ethiopian government officials were executed. On November 25th, the Irish Republican Army is outlawed in Britain following deaths of 21. And on November 30th, that's the last day of the month, which was a Saturday, Good Evening closes at Plymouth Theater in New York City after 438 performances. That's what was in the news at the time. What was going on in my life? Well, I was living in my hometown of Waco at 1015 Spate. I was living alone. I had my roommate, Mike Contreras Jr., had moved out at the end of May when school was completed for that year. We'd had quite a year together. And by the way, Mike and I remained friends until his death in 2016. He was really thought a lot of Mike and really miss him. But anyway, I was living there and I was working at Barron's Incorporated, a wholesale drug distributing company, packing boxes. I was also I had completed my coursework for my master's degree in church state studies at Baylor and was working on my master's thesis on the Nation of Islam, the Black Muslims. I was very active at St. Mary's Baptist Church under the leadership of the Reverend Dewey Pinckney, who passed away in 1994. And I was also active in various Masonic organizations. So I was staying busy. On November 20th, that was a Wednesday, I had seen this in the Waco paper and I drove down to Georgetown, Texas, between Waco and Austin, to the campus of Southwestern University, where I heard a lecture by Charles Morgan Jr., head of the Southwest Regional Branch of the American Civil Liberties Union. He was one of the attorneys who defended Muhammad Ali in his draft evasion case. And he got helped get Muhammad Ali off as a conscientious objector on grounds that the only war he would fight in would be Armageddon, the same argument that many Jehovah's Witnesses have used to gain CO status. And by the way, before he had the case, Hayden C. Covington had it, and he was a Jehovah's Witness who was responsible for gaining. He represented many members of his religious sect in religious liberty cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. And Muhammad Ali is his most famous non-Jehovah's Witness client. But he got off and was found not guilty, and it was a very interesting case. And I covered that in my thesis, and I got to talk to Morgan that night about his representation of Muhammad Ali. And I remember him saying that listening agents who were training to work for the FBI spent 40 hours a week listening to conversations that between Muhammad Ali and Elijah Muhammad and Elijah's chauffeur Albert. Very interesting case. 50 years later, I still find the Nation of Islam and related groups. I've written articles about the Nation of Islam, the Moorish Science Temple, and other Islamic groups. I find these organizations to be fascinating, and hope to continue my research in the future. That was a Wednesday, and I had been trying for some time to get a job then known as the Texas Department of Public Welfare. It's now known as Health and Human Services. I'd had a couple of interviews, and then I received a call on my job at Barron's from Steve Swift, whose office was in Mahia, and he was supervisor over not only Mahia, but Teague and Marlin and Franklin. And so he wanted to see me, and I told him it just so happens I was going to be in Mahia that Sunday. That Sunday was November the 24th, 1974. I was preaching at Union Baptist Church under the leadership of the late Reverend O.J. Naylor. And so that Sunday morning, I got up, I went to St. Mary's for church and had lunch somewhere. I don't remember where it was. And then I went to Mahia, and I stopped by and visited with my Aunt Lily McKenzie. And then I went to Union. First I went to Steve's office, and he told me he was just wanted to see that we didn't have any serious personality clash, and we didn't. We hit it off very well from the very beginning. And a day or two after that, I got a call that night. I preached at Union, had a good service. Then I went and was at the job, and it had to start on the following week, and I wanted to give my employer 2 weeks notice, but I couldn't because you got to issue an ultimatum. So I ended up putting in my resignation. Let's see, that would have been November 29th, the day after Thanksgiving. I'm sure I spent Thanksgiving with my family. And my mother and dad hosted Thanksgiving dinner for years and years in their home in Waco. But I worked the day after Thanksgiving, and I told my boss to give my last check to my colleague Adolph Wagner, and who was also a Baptist minister. He passed away in 2012, a very good friend and colleague. Come to think of it, I guess I work that day next week, but I would be starting to work in Teague on Monday, December 2nd. December 1st was a Sunday, December 2nd was a Monday, but so I was moving forward in research on my thesis toward getting my master's degree, which I finally received in May of 1976, and in starting my first real job with the state of Texas. By the way, I'm today working for the state of Texas again, for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and even though I've only been there since April, I'm already getting longevity pay and extra vacation time because of my prior state service. That is truly a blessing, and I hope nothing ever happens to mess it up. But in many ways, every month you got good things and bad things happen, and progress is always followed by regress. But in many ways, things move forward in 1974, not saying that November 74, not saying that there were I already told about some negative things that happened that month. But anyway, hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a wonderful evening and a great weekend and happy Thanksgiving coming up soon. God bless.